Cycling by Graham, Pamphlet 12 of the 52 pamphlets. I am told that I need to find a connection between earlier posts or pamphlets by Gantobbers and my own written piece. In pamphlet 11, Gillian mentioned an island formerly called Fernando Po, now Bioko. It had an important role in the Illuminatus trilogy, published in 1975, that inspired Bill Drummond and much of the backstory to the KLF's biggest hits. Searching through the Gantob blog, I see earlier mention of the island in a post by Skelbert's Pickles. Mr. Pickles states, "Bronwen flocks with swallow kind to reach the equatorial realm of Bioko, formerly the Fernando Po of great eschatorial renown." I detect little of import here. Fernão de Po, sometimes Poo, was a 15th century Portuguese explorer of the West African coast. Pickles goes on to speculate on undisclosed nuclear frissons with Kurt Finks, the Reverend Finks being Gantob's late father-in-law. Gillian also mentions the Cold War and the nuclear threat in her threads posts. I think that I can see a way of entwining my original piece about the experience of writing a chapter for Bill Drummond's memoir The Life Model and the unexpected places that took me over the past 12 months into a piece for Gantob's 52 pamphlets. This is my slightly revised resubmission. About 1,300 miles south of Bioko is the island of St Helena, part of the British Overseas Territory of St Helena, Ascension and Tristan da Cunha, and famous as Napoleon Bonaparte's final destination between 1815 and 1821. It is certainly an inaccessible place to hide someone away. I cannot find a means of travelling between the two on Google Maps, but there must be a route, presumably by crossing the few miles of Gulf of Guinea between Malabo and Cameroon, or the longer flight back to mainland Equatorial Guinea and from there to the airport on the east side of St Helena, south of Prosperous Bay Beach. It was here that Edmund Halley, 1656 to 1742, presumably taking a rather more adventurous route, set up an observatory in 1676 to 1677 and made an important astronomical advance that allowed him to make accurate predictions about the comet he viewed from the UK in September 1682. With its predictable 76 cycle, some of us may see Halley's comet next flyby in July 2061. Bill Drummond's new book, The Life Model, follows a rather shorter but also apparently continuous cycle of 71 days. Blink and you miss the years as they tick by day. I contributed the subconscious half of a year that first appeared on Sunday the 3rd of March 2024, but is no longer available. Stephen Clark, 1980, provided the conscious half. Separately, we had been assigned to cover Bill Drummond's 32nd year, the 29th of April 1984 to 28th of April 1985. My piece was titled Third Culture Kid. I really enjoyed researching and writing it, and was pleased with the response on social media on Sunday. It made the weeks of knocking ideas around in my own subconscious, scribbled sentences, discarded drafts, and ultimately writing a 1,000-word piece from scratch on deadline day, the 31st of December 2022, worthwhile. I have done very little creative writing in adult life, focusing instead on the quotidian activities of work and family, plus playing in a wind band. But that is simply about playing the next note from a score and then the next, rather than creating something from scratch. Reading about somebody else's life, piecing together details into a narrative and imagining context to fill the gaps was challenging. If you want to read or listen to Third Culture Kid, you will need to wait until another 71 days are up. So it goes. Rather confusingly for a memoir, my contribution was written in the third person. This was a mistake on my part. I hadn't read the instructions. It did, however, allow me to write about the three parts of Bill Drummond's subconscious: the sentimentalist, the Filofax, and the iconoclast. It was interesting to read in my research for the improved version of this pamphlet that Gantob 3 insisted on that the aforementioned Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson's book The Illuminatus Trilogy was written in a confusing mishmash of first, third and potentially other persons. Sounds like hard work. I'm glad that I stuck to the third person. If the planning and writing of the 1,000-word piece for the life model was inspiring, for me at least, the aftermath was not. It took me back into a spiral of searching, obsessing over and purchasing items that I suddenly needed to read, listen to, own, even if I had already owned and sold or given them away decades ago. 30 years on from my first foray into compulsive collecting, I was back in the zone. But this time, rather than popping into record shops around my hometown, or when I visited other cities and countries, I had the whole of the internet and social media to check. Minor clues took me into wormholes of searching for records, CDs or books with a KLF connection, and now also pamphlets that appeared to offer new information and potential answers. My bookcase and shelves filled up, bank accounts were raided, and my emails, texts and social media messages filled with a whole army of new contacts, driving each other on. If this pamphlet appears to be taking us in a series of cycles, some predictable and comforting as celestial clockwork, the K-themed whirlpool I was being sucked into required escape velocity, if you can overlook the mixed metaphors. Counterintuitively, my way out of problematic collecting, which had been sparked off by researching and writing about Bill Drummond's life and the KLF, was to write more. Not the technical and scientific articles and letters that I have been required to write from time to time, but short creative pieces that would help document and hopefully cure or at least contain my resurgent tendencies for all things K. Early 2023, Billy Childish's Viper's Tongue Quarterly made its first call for submissions. I went for a walk, made a mental note of vivid vignettes I had observed recently from the collector scene, and submitted a piece close to the inaugural Spring 2023 issue's deadline. For the next few weeks, my frequent refreshes of websites on my phone were biased towards Viper's Tongue and Billy Childish sites rather than anything K-themed, and the dopamine hit of seeing my name up on the Viper's Tongue website and receiving an L13 stamped envelope with a printed, numbered and hand-stamped volume containing a short piece of my own writing rather than an expensive print by Jimmy Cauty or K2 Plant Hire had a long tail. I checked the next deadline and started writing, and repeated that for the next 3 issues until I had documented the cycle of addiction, creativity and, hopefully, recovery. While I obviously had insight into the issues at play and can document that through these pieces, none of this is to say that I was fully cured without the K. I still checked and contributed to the KLF sites, watched the birth of the KLF RS, and travelled across to the Curfew Tower Curry Night in August 2023, using up 2 days of annual leave that I really couldn't spare. I also submitted a couple of pieces to the Gantob Democratisation Drive in December 2023, one on collecting, the other on waiting for mysterious people to make an appearance even when you know they won't. All to earn a copy of the second Gantob book because of even the most spurious of KLF connections. I didn't know at that point that there would be a Bill Drummond piece in the same volume. And I bought a crowdsourced 23 themed manual, The Lost Doctor, for my Doctor Who mad daughter's Christmas stocking. I'm not sure that the Ken Campbell and Illuminatus references were fully understood. I was still obviously thinking about the letter K, but things were on a better trajectory. I am keen to close a loop in the episode that led on from my chapter for Bill Drummond's crowdsourced memoir, The Life Model. Here are short excerpts from the resulting 3 Viper's Tongue quarterly pieces. If you want to read the full text, then each quarterly volume, with poetry and prose from a collection of artists, was produced in editions of 313. They can still be bought from the L13 website. Viper's Tongue Quarterly, Spring 2023. A certain asymmetry. The connoisseur surveyed his acquisitions. His room was laid out in almost perfect symmetry, apart from the door which opened to the left. On one side were the unread books and unplayed LPs and 45s. On the other side, the same titles had been leafed through or played on his specially modified hi-fi before being reshelved in protective sleeves. Autumn 2023. Archiving persistence. He has some failures. Reading about a pamphlet that he has failed to find through conventional routes, he learns that a copy was inserted into bottles, sealed and launched into the sea from Reykjavik in 2003. He charts the tides and books a family holiday to Tiree in April 2023 with a cottage facing west over the Atlantic Ocean. This piece also references a missed encounter with a local artist. Winter 2024, writing things off. A few months later, he sends the first draft to the agent and they meet on Zoom. There is interest in the subject. A promising young writer, photographer in the 1950s who sustained head injuries while fly posting and never worked again. The possibility of a TV tie-in is mentioned. We all have a book in us, and apparently I'm not so sure, but I'm happy with my few short pieces that contain a sketch of the internal workings of an addict. I can point to them and demonstrate that I have moved on. But what next? If I achieve that escape velocity and extricate myself from the orbit of planet K, I would like to write a piece that does not mention or allude to the KLF, Bill Drummond, Jimmy Cauty, or anything else tangentially related to that galaxy. Perhaps it would be for Viper's Tongue Quarterly, if there is another issue, or maybe Gantob would consider such a piece for the 52 pamphlets, if I can demonstrate some continuation of theme. It would need to be very loosely from an earlier Gantob pamphlet. Until then, I am focused on my regular work, family, and playing the clarinet each week with my local community wind band. Graham, the 5th of March 2024, pamphlet 12 of the 52 pamphlets, and potentially this could be considered as an answer to question 18, when is addiction?